The election of Droupadi Murmu as India's first tribal president, as well as India's youngest president, continues to generate national and international attention. These images, as she took oath, were dismissed by some hard nosed cynics as tokenism. But let's remember that tokenism in itself is also deeply valuable. And there's a lot to unpack here beyond tokenism as well. And on this program today, we're going to attempt to do that with one of the world's foremost public intellectuals, Dalit scholar at Harvard University, Dr. Suraj Yengde, whose book Caste Matters is generating a whole lot of debate within academic circles. So, Dr. Yengde, it's great to see you. Read your piece in the Indian Express also with some interest. Let's talk a little bit about how you, who has a sort of personal lived history as a Dalit growing up in India, now at Harvard, saw this moment. When you saw Miss Murmu taking oath, what was what was it that you thought? Was there a sense of disbelief? Was there a sense of some elation? Or did you, like so many others, say, this is a token but?
Barkha, I'm so glad I'm here, and we are talking, and I must just tell you, I usually like to talk to people who also write, and you're somebody who is putting the ideas into words, and I think it had its own value and its own credibility. So
Thank you.
I'm also incredibly honored to be here.
Thank you.
Yes,
Thank you.
indeed. When President Murmu was announced, her name was being in discussion before even she was announced. There was already some kind of buzz. Now for all their, as I've already said, the limitations and misgivings that the RSS does. What we really need to also understand is that they have, and whatever one might identify that representation as tokenistic or symbolic, they have given prominence to two quotas. Now, president itself, the position itself, in many ways in India's electorally defined parliamentary democracy, is more representative, but also that's the executive power, the first citizen of India. And now, if you think the first citizen of India is an advivasi, but a woman, no less, from the background, is really incredible that we have this theories and stories about how India was formed and how many iterations it went through. But the most recent modern construction of India, and you see that the indigenous people, whatever the way we define indigeneity, are represented there, have a very designated place. Now, when this news came, as goes with every observer of India's politics these days, it is very hard to not think also other viewpoint, because somehow it has been reduced to that. Almost everything has to be assessed through a cynical lens, and I think yeah.
But I was just going to say, for a moment, let's not be cynical. Let's look at the incredible journey of this Adivasi woman, as you said, who's now the president of India. The fact that she has come from incredible personal struggle, losing both her sons, her husband, then setting up a school to commemorate them, coming from a village that continues to be diminished by poverty. And those are some of the images of that school that commemorates, all the losses that she has experienced in her life. Let us for a moment also look at this extraordinary journey and recognize it for what it is, don't you think?
Absolutely. I mean, there is no doubt that has made, and it has really, it will create confidence in many young girls and boys and people also, that there is somebody who's representative. Now, what can a president do and not is the second question. The primary question is, has there been a person of in a position that somebody is right now before, and it has not been, and so incredibly inspiring moment for all of us. Now, again, I've also, and I've written that in the piece as well, I say, we can go about then finding accountability individually with Draupadi Murmu. I mean, that's not how any structure works. We have various powers that encourage and support each other, but also there are many issues that kind of diverge. And so if we have to really find out an accountability from Murmu. It's not President Murmu. It has to be the structure that we need to find out. And I think that's what also President Kovind was reduced to by saying, he's somebody, he's there, but there is this again this notion, and so politically again everybody falls on their face because you cannot not support an Adivasi woman. Doesn't matter what ideology you might belong to.
Of
Do,
course.
do you know what I mean? And as a moment for India's Bahujan community, there is a certain dog whistle here that we are cognizant of what you are doing. There is an acknowledgement.
But let's take up something you noticed, and I saw it on your Twitter feed, which was her greeting, her salutation of Johar, which I think a lot of people in India would not even know about. Right? I mean, that is how culturally deracinated so many of us are. And you wrote this on Twitter. You said, Johar, before Namaskar, India's Bahujan castes addressed each other with the salutation of Johar. So speak a little bit about this.
The pronunciation of Johar is also in many ways Johar, and through that, many local in India's religions, independent religions, have their own salutation that more or less relate or signify the idea of Johar and what it meant. Specifically, the communities in Maharashtra where I come from, Johar was the way people greeted, and of course, Namaskar.
Did you grow up saying Johar?
No, the generation at least before me, 3 generations prior, everybody almost say. But after during Ambedkar's time, it sort of started to. They would call each other with Johar, but Namaskar became, and then Jai Bhavani, and now it's Jai Bhim, right? It kind of,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
historically that has been there, and Johar is really for personally for me, the President of India is greeting you the way she would greet her own people, and
Yeah.
this encompassing that my people, my country people, and it's a very beautiful moment there when you get to hear the first citizen of the country addressing something what we thought was a private greeting, and really making it public, making it more acceptable, and really establishing one of the first things a president does, at least publicly, is this, and I think there is a certain enthusiasm, and she didn't say anything else, which was phenomenal for me.
Yeah, but her record as governor does actually tell you that there were laws she
Yeah,
refused to sign
yeah.
because she thought that they would go against the interests of the Adivasi people. So she has, in her own way, even with the way the power is organized and a lot of these positions that are titular,
Right.
she has refused to sign in laws in the past.
Absolutely, and it's very interesting because the community that she comes from, the Santhal, at various moments, we have to understand the social history of the community. Santhali community is very rich, as with other Adivasi groups that we have, and particularly within the central region, uh, that there is a very strong emphasis still about the idea of belonging, and the idea of land. And I think after much protest that she sent back, one could have thought that that would have been a punishment for really trying to not support certain legislations. But she really challenged, and the behemoth, and the kind of neo-capitalist way, the neoliberal way, the way state is going, she really putting her feet down, is also acknowledged and appreciated by the people in the positions within the RSS as well as BJP. However, I was told that RSS is more sensitive than BJP towards the idea of diversity and representation. They would like to think about various groups, but by BJP appointing Murmu, they have really tried to trump RSS in this. And this was told to me by somebody who is within the BJP ranks, and I thought that was quite interesting to see that they are also trying to perhaps catch in their own ways to India's social diversity.
Yeah, but now let's look at some of the there are many things to feel good and touched and moved by. But if you look at the hard data, it actually tells you that in 2020 there was a nearly 10% increase in crime against both scheduled tribes and scheduled castes. Every 10 minutes, a Dalit in India actually faces a crime. So little under 10% for both SCSTs, there was this increase in crime in the last recorded year of 2020, and this is when the lockdown and the pandemic was on. When you look at this data, what do you say?
It's almost like any researcher who is studying India's crime, India's policing, India's under trials, and uh, looks at the data, and they are not much surprised, because they're also working with the data that is a decennial. It's almost a decade long data, and within the numbers are in thousands, right? And so it is not really numbing me, if you know what I mean.
Hmm.
It's like I know this kind of situation. I've read the data before. I'm reading, maybe the numbers have changed, and I'm using this data to cite about this growing incidents. However, the one thing that concerns and really troubles me is, what is it that is propelling one to go and commit a crime, especially against India as marginalized, when you had a president of India who was a Dalit. Now,
Hmm.
there has to be something much more, than what symbolism speaks about. Here it is really, how do we empower the people who should be actually, work around many kind of lines. And what I mean by that is, see, there is one that political structure works, there is one that is bureaucratic structure, and there is judicial. And by looking at the increase of crime rates, what we have essentially said is, the three structures of any governance, the executive, bureaucracy, and legislature, are really not are really not working to undermine that. There is not fear of those three layers. Neither judiciary is there, neither bureaucracy, and either with the elected representatives. And that's the most concerning part, because either of the three institutions, if they put their foot strongly on the ground, one could really, eliminate or try to decrease, if not at all wipe out of these atrocities. But there is something that, when three of them kind of, merge together, and gives rise to incidents of such unfortunate
Yeah.
nature.
Yeah, let me now get to the heart of a debate that often divides Indians. What happens to identity, tribal or caste, when it is layered by power or a
Mhm.
certain degree of economic upliftment? I read a profile of you, for example, which where a journalist follows you back home, where a journalist talks about how your caste has followed you all the way to the United States of America. And there are others who will say, no, you have to look at the intersectionality of this moment. Does caste travel? Does does President Murmu's identity as an Adivasi travel with her, even though she is arguably the first citizen of India today? How do you look at this debate? You have called yourself, for example, a proud beneficiary, as it were, of India's affirmative action
Oh,
uh, uh, programs, especially in education. You're today at Harvard. Uh,
oh.
are you a privileged Dalit? Does that change your life? Does that diminish your identity as a Dalit? And apply the same, let's say, to a President Murmu and the remaining members of her family.
And I think that's why that we really need to, what is called a semiotic. Now, semiotic is the idea of representation and interpretation science. This is a Greek way of looking at things. And by that, it means is, that could work either way. It's a double-edged sword. One is, of course, it might help you inspire. It might help you think about, you can do more than what is within your limits, and other people can get inspired. But also, Barkha, people might say, hey, you know what, she made it. President Murmu has made it, so let's not talk about Adivasi. Now, the reason they don't want to talk about is, they don't want to be complicit. They don't want to acknowledge that there exists a problem. If people are really genuine, then what will happen today is, we would expect now that the stereotypical representation of Adivasis, and for me, with President Murmu, there has to be much more Adivasis taking up on leadership roles. people in important portfolios across the spectrum wherever the job opportunities are. And unless that top position is reflected on the ground, we might not call such a kind of a change of a certain nature. Now, talking about people who make it, and
Mhm.
what about their family members and all, we have to look at as a individual merit as opposed to a community upliftment. It's a different thing, especially when you achieve something, and in a society that is deeply unequal, where metrics are decided by the kind of land you own or resources you have, or the it's not one economic metric. If you just make it, doesn't mean you own it. You are still trying to find your way. And it happens to, for example, women in position of power try to cross over the patriarchal structures and get into one person in the board meeting, but it is still surrounded by male who still try to undermine her. What does that mean? I mean, she has symbolically made it, but what is her life experiences? Has she would that change in the constituency she represents? It's a slow change, but does that mean now that we should say, you know what, women have made it into this boardroom, and I think
Yeah.
we should start reconsidering? I mean, it will take a reorganizing of a society, and that would happen. One of the ways is by having more representation. And almost anybody in India, instead of being proud, for example, see, there are few narratives that float around that why should one, because the idea is that the Dalit life or Adivasi life more or less is confined to their localized identity. Like,
Hmm.
people try to locate me. Where are you from? What is it? And then they try to equate my whatever I do with that localized, and localized identity is a caste identity.
Yeah, but it's a little bit similar to gender, right? Like I think women struggle, at least I have struggled all my life. How much of me is my gender, how much of me is not? It's a lifelong struggle, and there are parts of you that are your gender, there are parts of you that aren't, and it's not a clear silo. This is a lifelong process of self-examination.
You are absolutely spot on, Barkha, and I think that's what we need to understand, that um, what we have done is, because there is a deep insecurity among people. I always think, why do people feel immediate, like an affront, if there is a group that has not been representative across? And I'm sympathetic to for example, the gender diversity, but again, what we see is that gets questioned every now and then, because the woman has to constantly prove her credibility by either rising, quote unquote, rising to the standards of what is set by the male, or being subordinate to the power structures. That's not what we are asking for. We would like to have it very, on a leveling, equal plate. And so, yes, I remain a proud beneficiary of India's reservation. Had there not been reservation, I would have been any clerk in one of the banks trying to encash 25,000 rupees per month, trying to live under the debt. Nothing wrong in that. But if there was, because of reservation, I could think that there were other opportunities, right? And I got it, and I made it. Now imagine if we are able to give such support on a very sincere, honest level to so many people, we will create a mass of people who are not only contributing economically, whose, of course, taxes will then be used for various other welfare projects, but they will be part of a really new growth story. But
Yeah.
if I always tell them, few people cannot bear the burden of many people. Let many people bear the burden of few people. And I think policies like reservation and quotas are a move, I think, towards that.
Let me ask you finally. You have spoken about categories, like categories. I hope I'm pronouncing it correctly. And there's been a lot of debate around that in academic circles. The fact that you don't look at a caste group as a monolith, that you further subcategorize caste identity as well as sort of tribal identity. Can you speak a little bit about why that is important to your understanding of identity?
See, every group has a few structural insights, and those insights emanate from how a society or how a community interacts with other social forces. And in these social forces, there could be caste, there could be race, they could be tribe. But within that, also there exists what we call a class structure. And that's why I think when we talk about any identities, we have to be very sensitive to how class informs that experiences. And that's why I am also concerned with the quality of what a person's life is. And in today's world, where economy is determining factor, I don't know, maybe there was a time in antiquity where economy was not, and perhaps other things were important. But today, the forces of economy play a primary, if not primary, one of the important identities. We cannot then undermine what this economic forces produce, which is a clear-cut class-based discrimination. And so we have to bring in that analysis, and that's why I espouse categories, and that doesn't only relate to Dalit or tribal. It relates to Brahmin groups, it relates to Khatris and various Varnas, because within that understanding exists. And for us, if we really need to sort of draw a meeting point, a kind of a location where we can meet, I think these categories are the experiences that can help us loosen, because somehow there are so many divisions. For example, Brahmin community Barkha has close to 1,500 subcastes. Now, not all Brahmins, the way we interpret, are being the head honchos of whatever positions, but also there is immense diversity. So if we look at this categorical experiences of these people, then I think we might have something more to chew and talk about as a community, as a country, and as a society.
I mean, I would say the ultimate privilege that class bestows on you, if you're not born into, as a Dalit or a tribal, is to make you oblivious of your caste. I mean, I remember being an 18-year-old asked, "What is your caste?" and proudly saying, "I don't know my caste." And it took me many more years of a lived experience to know that that was the ultimate sort of class privilege, and that I would never have been able to afford that privilege had I had to sort of battle at the bottom of, or the enforced bottom of the social totem pole, as it were. I have to ask you in the end, what is your hope? Your hope at this point in terms of expectations from President Murmu?
Oh, I just hope she inspires, as she's already doing, many young girls, many young women, and she really bolsters them. And when I'm saying this, I'm getting goosebumps. I really mean by it that she really, goes to the deep heart, because you know what she is. She's not Pratibha Patil, right? A landed class elite Patils coming from a certain. She is Murmu, who has a
Yeah.
very different story. She is not, she is not somebody who's grown up with the certain protection and privilege. Even if she was class privilege, her Adivasi identity is the primary, and that would have make her more vulnerable. So I really hope that, and she is already doing that. But in addition, that her work, that she will hopefully send, the way she did the work in Jharkhand, send back some legislations for reconsiderations, and if at all, take the government to task whenever there is rising atrocity, there is rising communal violence, and much more gender related disparity, that she really becomes the leader, and really gives an example of what a president was. She really becomes, I think, a monument for us to celebrate for years to come.
Thank you, Dr. Suraj Yengde. Always a pleasure learning from you, and thank you so much for talking to us. And look forward to your next set of writings. Thank you, and take care.
You too. Bye bye.
Thank you. Bye bye. It's great to see you here. Thank you for watching our work. If you haven't subscribed yet, don't forget to click the bell icon and subscribe to Mojo Story and support independent, robust journalism.